Let me turn then to a remarkable story about modern capitalism that sort of illustrates the idea that the problems it has force solutions which then create more problems. Let me give you the example that is urgent now. You all know that we had a crash of global capitalism in 2008 and 9, and that we're still kind of digging our way out. One of the ways that governments around the world, the United States and other countries, tried to cope with that crash was by dropping interest rates to historic lows. In a number of countries to this day, interest rates are actually below zero. They're negative. In other words, the bank pays you for you to loan money or deposit money in a bank, not the other way around, et cetera, et cetera. So, what happened with these very low interest rates, designed to boost the economy in the face of that crash, was that every corporation that had any kind of economic problem or need suddenly had big help. It could borrow money for next to nothing, or literally for nothing. Cheap money was a temptation very few corporations could resist. And the end result has been, over the last 10 years, the growth of corporate borrowing unprecedented in the history of capitalism. And it means we now have basically what we call a debt overhang. Corporations doing a lot of business, but owing more money than ever before. This has led one of the international agencies charged with watching this situation, called the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to take a close look at the level of debt to come to some assessment of what it means. And in the last few weeks, they've issued a number of reports that I want to highlight for you. First, 40% of the corporate debt in 8 leading countries, led by the United States, and now I'm going to almost read so you understand what's at stake here. Those levels of debt in those 8 countries would be impossible to service if there were a downturn half as serious as the one we had in 2008. In other words, they are so leveraged, they are so indebted, that if we had a downturn only half as bad as the last one we had, they couldn't pay their debts, those corporations, and ... No one knows what the consequences could be. But here's a clear message: not good. Second implication: many corporations borrowed for reasons, among others, of being able to repurchase their own stock in the stock market. These things are called stock buybacks. The company is buying back from the public the shares it issued at some earlier moment. Okay, what this does, and why it's done, is to boost the price of these stocks in the stock market, because the companies are buying them, and so the imbalance between supply of these shares and a new buyer, the corporation itself, drives up the price. This may be done because the bonuses that top executives get come from the price of the shares, which they are therefore raising for their own reasons. But it suggests that had the cost of borrowing been less, there would have been less of this, which led the IMF to conclude that in the event of a problem, share prices could come down very fast, very far. Notice capitalism's developing new problems: debt overhang, overvalued shares, because of the way it solved its last crash, leading to the problem that the IMF warns about of an impending other crash. Capitalism is a system that is fundamentally unstable, always has been, and all that the IMF is telling us is that it continues to be so and threatens everyone as a result.